Thank you. I was asked to give a title to my talk, and I said, untypical types. I meant by that a few typefaces which are sort of out of the run-of-the-mill of most of the work that I do because of how they came about or how they're used or something about them that's a little bit unusual and that I can talk about. I mean, a lot of my work, there isn't really much to say about it, but these particular projects do have a bit of a backstory to them and so on. This is the first one, and this came about through a most serendipitous encounter. I was back in London on a visit, walking down Piccadilly, walked into the Royal Academy to get out of the rain, I think, and found myself in an astonishing exhibition of the work of the Italian Renaissance artist Andrea Mantegna. And what gobsmacked me about this exhibition was the lettering in Mantegna's paintings and engravings, which I thought was simply beautiful. It was, of course, revived lettering, revisited lettering of imperial Rome. Mantinea was a scholar as well as an artist, and he researched and used classical architecture and classical sculpture and classical lettering in his work. So I got kind of interested in Mantinea and looked into him a little bit. He built himself a house in Mantua, which is still there. You can go and see it. The stone, the foundation stone, is very worn, unfortunately, but you can see the date. It was 1476, and you can see his name, Mantinea, which is the Latin version of his name, which I borrowed for this typeface as a sort of homage to Mantinea and his memory. It's a titling face. It has no lowercase, but it has some other things kind of in there instead. This is a detail of an engraving by Mantinea, nice little bit of lettering, sort of classical Roman lettering, as I say. Notice in the third line how he's joined together the M and the P. This is something that was done by Roman letterers, and particularly done at the time of the Renaissance. Why they did it, it's hard to tell. Sometimes it's plain that it's in order to make a letter, a word shorter, fitted in a space. Sometimes it just seems to be for a sort of enjoyment, I mean, for joy in manipulating the beautiful letters of our Roman alphabet. So when I set about doing this typeface, I decided to include in it some ligatures. They are not part of our typographic tradition. They're part of the epigraphic tradition. They come from inscriptions, as I say. I can't say that Mantinea is the first, and certainly not now, the only typeface that has capital ligatures in it, but there aren't, or weren't, very many. I've got a close-up view of some of these ligatures. They're not as easy to make as you might think. You know, you think, okay, I'll take two letters, I'll swoosh them together, and you've got a ligature. I drew and discarded far more than I used. This is one that I used. This is the MP that Mantinea drew as well. But they're oddly difficult to make them work. No lowercase, as I said, but it does have this, the face has this odd set of sort of flying small caps. They're aligned with the top of the capitals rather than the baseline. I'm sometimes asked, it's actually a good question. People say, okay, so you're making digital types now. Could they have been made by previous technologies? Could this have been done in metal? And by and large, I would say the answer is absolutely. Why not? But there are a few things about digital fonts that are exclusively digital, and perhaps this is one of them. You see this sort of alternative R with a long sweeping tail, and one of these little flying small caps that I have positioned so they overlap. You do that with a kerning table, which is now sort of taken for granted as part of a digital font, but if you tried to do this in metal, you'd have had to make a single piece of metal with both the R and the O on it, and you wouldn't have wanted to have to do that. So you can say that there are some things about this particular face that are exclusively digital. How important they are, I'm not sure, but there are some things that I couldn't have done if I'd been designing this back early in my life. So that was one strain, finding this exhibition without knowing I was doing it. And then another strain that fed into this design, this is the public library in Boston where I live, and as you approach it, you will see that under each of these arched top windows, there are panels of lettering. They go around three sides of the building, and they're a sort of primitive form of advertising because they're the names of the great minds whose works are within the library. The library was designed by well-known architect Charles Follen McKim, opened in, I think, 1892. And I was fascinated by this lettering. You see, it's all very well if you've got a nice short name like Kepler or Galen or Morse, they fit in nicely. But what about these here astronomers in the top panel, Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, Somerville, Miriam Mitchell, and so on? Whoever designed these, I don't know if it was McKim himself or someone, did a very ingenious and interesting job of packing these letters into the rather narrow space of these granite panels. I think I've got another one. Yes. Look at Demosthenes, lower left. There's a THE ligature and NE ligature and so on. I thought these were just wonderful and photographed all of them. And I tried to research, who had done them, how they came about, and so on. Without success until by chance I stumbled on a book about lettering published in Boston in 1902. And it shows this photograph of a stone which was obviously a trial cutting for these inscriptions on the facades of the public library. And I recognized this alphabet immediately because of this strange sort of non-letter, which is at the end of it after the Z. This curious sort of telltale is actually supposed to be an ampersand. It's from a very beautiful manuscript which is in the Vatican Library. And it's the earliest attempt that's come down to us to record the capitals of Imperial Rome, what we call Trajan lettering. And the bizarre thing about this for me is that the author of this manuscript was a man called Felice Feliciano, who was a friend of Mantegna's. So these two different streams, the exhibition that I saw in London and this Beaux-Arts building in Boston, sort of led back to a small group of artists and scholars. Felice was a scribe in the Veneto in the 1460s. Very strange sort of coincidence. I could not understand at first how McKim knew about this manuscript in the Vatican, but then I discovered a German epigraphic treatise published in the 1870s, I think, which presented this, illustrated this alphabet of Felice's. When I looked at it closely, I saw whoever engraved this plate really did Felice a disservice. This is a very beautiful facsimile produced by Belser-Verlag in Zurich in, I think, 1985. It's really beautifully produced. You can see the see-through from the letters on the back of the pages of vellum. This is Felice's drawing, and then if you look at the engraving, they're really kind of cack-handed compared to... But this is obviously what McKim followed. He was not the greatest draftsman, Felice, but he did a better job than the engraver. So there were these two threads, and there was a third one. One of the great delights of moving to Boston, when I did in the 80s, was discovering the burial grounds in and around Boston, some of which have the most beautiful early gravestones, 17th century gravestones. Here's just one. And they're generally absolutely packed full of ligatures. HE in here, there's a THE, HN in John, and September has a couple of them there. Now, why these were done, I can only guess. You know, the early pilgrim settlers, Puritans in New England, were not known for their playfulness. I can only suppose, but they were thrifty, you know, and I have a sort of theory that you know, it saves time and labor if you make ligatures. You know, price for cutting a tombstone, 5 shillings. Tombstone with ligatures, 4 shillings. There's less work involved. But anyway, I love these. The local stone in Boston is slate. You know, this stone is over, what, 340 years old or something like that. It looks like it was cut yesterday. You can still see the scribed lines, guidelines that the stonemason did. Slate is indestructible, even by Boston weather, which is saying something. Thank God for Rolling Stone. I mean, this was back in the glory days when Fred Woodward was the art director. You think, oh, no one's ever going to see these things. They're never going to find them in the font, use them. But then I picked up Rolling Stone, and my God, did they use them. They really got hold of this typeface and made it work really hard. This is a poster you see. It was also, of course, a cover of Rolling Stone. They used it inside the book as well. That's very nice, you know, when you've done something a bit unusual and someone absolutely gets the point of it and uses it really well. So this was a nice feedback. And I think, you know, by the way, it's said that musicians like to get their face on the cover of Rolling Stone. Well, so do type designers like to get their face on the cover of Stone. I'm sure Fiona Apple was thrilled. So was I. You know, this project, I think, is sort of typical, at least, of me. And listening to other people talking at this conference, I think it's perhaps true of a number of us. It's very seldom that an influence sort of comes to me in a single pure form. It's always a mess. You know, there's an exhibition here, a building here, a gravestone here, and so on. And it all gets kind of stewed up, and what comes out is some sort of amalgam of these various influences. And as I say, I think that's kind of the way it works with me, and I think that's a fairly common occurrence. Next project, a very different one, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, wonderful place, avant-garde art gallery. Back in the 90s, the sort of changing of the guard, and there was a new design director, Laurie Haycock-Mackler. And Laurie, like any self-respecting design director, when she moved there, wanted to do a new identity. So what do graphic designers do for an identity? They do a logo. That's their knee-jerk reaction. But Laurie, I think, realized that a logo was hopeless for the Walker Art Center. You know, logos are corporate, they're monolithic. The Walker is deliberately diverse in every way. Their motto is they're open to interpretation. They're closed on Mondays, but they're open to interpretation. And how do you make a logo open to interpretation? It's very difficult. Laurie had the idea, and she put it to me, and I jumped at it, that maybe there was a way of using a typeface as both an identifier and as something that was a little bit more flexible in its application, something that was more open to interpretation. And neither of us had the faintest idea where we would go with this when we started it. But I loved the idea and was very fond both of the Walker and of Laurie and her very small team of designers in those days. I won't take you through the whole process of doing this, but this was the result. It's a kind of medium weight sans serif at the heart of it, fairly vanilla. But as part of the font, there are, I think, 5 different flavors of serif, which you, the user, you, the designer sitting at the Walker composing this typeface, can stick onto letters or not as you choose. And down in the bottom couple of lines, you can see there are also some horizontal joining bars, so you can sort of roll your own ligatures as well. Think of the underlying sans serif as like a sort of store window, shop window mannequin, which you can dress up in different costumes if you like, or you can leave them bare naked as well. They look quite nice. We call these serifs Snapon Serifs. I wanted to call them deputy serifs, but everyone groaned, and so I had to call them Snapon Serifs. You can see how they work. Here's a close-up. I mean, you know, each of these serifs has its own keyboard address. If you hit Shift-Option-1, you get this thing. If you hit Shift Option 7 or something, you get another. So you can position these on any letter that you care to do so as you are setting the type. This was sort of a laboratory situation of working with the designers there, things going backwards and forwards and so on, and nice communications from them as we worked through this typeface. One of the nice things about having the serifs as separate characters is you can put them on letters that don't normally have serifs. There aren't very many O's with serifs in typography, but here is one. And then, of course, I'll try and make the point with this slide and the next one of what we were trying to do. In those days, they published a printed monthly calendar which told you what was going on at the Walker. This particular edition was devoted to independent movies. So here you have one page with, they always stacked the lettering. They love to do that. Stacked illustrations on the lettering on the illustrations. So here you have the italic, and it's got these rather sort of graceful bracketed serifs and some discrete use of the joining strokes and so on. Turn the page, and here you have the same typeface, but in a different dress. Has these rather heavy, well, for one thing, it's knocked out of black, but it has these rather heavy sort of Egyptian serifs. Well, I hope that someone reading this this copy of the calendar would have been conscious at some subliminal level of the fact that, this and this are the same typeface. Otherwise, we've wasted our time. There's no identifier. But, it was playing with this face in this way that they used it. One of the nicest things about the Walker project was what happened to it afterwards. And I'll show you a few examples. We are now in the front hall of a building in Tokyo belonging to the Misawa Company, leading Japanese type company. And they use this hallway for temporary exhibitions. And they asked the Walker and me to make an exhibition of the Walker typeface, just exactly what I've been explaining to you. And they had two very delightful brainwaves as well. One was to ask Iko Tanaka to do a sort of invitation for the exhibition. I'm kind of bragging here. It's rather nice to have an invitation for your exhibition designed by the late, great, and very much missed Iko. He says, which Matthew, he obviously thinks I'm suffering from some multiple personality disorder or something. He's probably quite right. But this was a nice thing. But then they also commissioned 5 designers to make posters, borrow the font and make posters. And I'll just show you 2 of these because I thought they were so nice. We only read horizontally, but the Japanese are completely indifferent as to whether they do yokogumi or tatagumi. It doesn't matter. It's rather refreshing sometimes to see Latin type printed up and down. Notice, by the way, top left of that slide, you see that W? Because Walker begins with W, I thought I should make them a special W, so I invented this rather unusual W for their exclusive use. Remember that for a minute. But it was this poster that really blew me away. What the designer has done, as you can see, he's dismantled my Latin typeface and he's recompiled it as kana and kanji. And if that's not being open to interpretation, I don't know what is. I mean, this was, I thought this was amazing. It's my name at the top in kana and then some kanji down below. Another nice use, this was done at Pentagram in San Francisco, in-flight magazine for, what is that, United, is it? I pulled this out of a seat pocket and said, hello, I think I recognize this. Brian Jacobs was the designer. It's a crazy quilt. It's an alphabet, but it's a crazy quilt. And it's really beautifully done. I liked it very much. Here's another example of the use of this typeface. This is Leonardo Sonali. A friend of mine, Italian designer. He's a really, really interesting typographer. I went to visit his studio a few years ago, and he made this poster. It makes a rather odd slide because it's printed on tracing vellum, and there's sort of show through from some blurb on the back. But when I saw this on his wall, I had a very strange reaction because I thought, I recognize this is my Walker typeface, but the majority of the letters I have never seen before. What does that tell you? It's your typeface, but you haven't seen the letters before? This is schizophrenic. I recognize the O and the A, but Leonardo's made himself an M out of something or other. I don't know what. The W is two V's. There's T's and other things in there I've never seen before. And it's a nice sort of acrostic. You see, my name goes across the top, and then it says the art of type down the middle. So, you know, it's really nice to lend a font to someone and see them go to hell with themselves and do something nice. So I made an issue on this. I actually don't know who designed this cover. It's very nice. And I'll read you what it says in this bubble bottom right. It says, bits and pieces put together to present a semblance of a whole. If any of you have ever been to the Walker in Minneapolis, you will know this quotation. It's actually a work of art by an American conceptual artist, Lawrence Weiner. And it was there on the wall, the outside wall of the Walker, since well before we designed this typeface. I showed you that W, which I invented. I was down in New Orleans later, and this W is on every goddamn manhole cover in New Orleans. They ripped me off. The fact that the manhole covers were made many years before the typeface is, of course, irrelevant. Anticipatory plagiarism is the worst kind, as you know. Somebody asked me after this whole Walker thing was, they don't use it any longer at the Walker, by the way, they've moved on to something else. Somebody asked, where did this idea for the Snapon Serifs come from? And I couldn't think, but as I thought about it, I realized where it did come from. Many years before, 20 years before, for linotype, I had to make a version of Devanagari, the Indian script that's used for writing Hindi. And it's one of those writing systems where the letters look as though they're washing hanging from a clothesline, a horizontal bar. And it has these strange things that sort of stick up and down as well. If I explode those forms, you can see there are things called matras and yukas. And those have to drop into position with respect to the consonants and half consonants in exactly the right place as you keyboard them, or as someone who speaks Hindi would keyboard them in the right order. And that is exactly what happens with the Walker typeface. But I had no idea. I mean, when I set about doing the Walker face, I didn't think, oh, I'll do this like Devanagari, you know. But I think this happens to us, you know. Something you do lies dormant in your mind on some synapse, and sometime later, in this case more than 20 years, it jumps out again and finds another use. Well, you know, type designers are at the rock bottom of the food chain. We are preyed upon by typographers, by graphic designers, by art directors, by web designers, by I don't know who else. We are hostages to the people who use our work. And most of my work, when I do it, I mean, it goes out in the world. I have no idea. I can't police it. I can't control it. No idea who will use it. But sometimes, as in the Walker project, it's never been sort of generally released, this typeface. But as I showed you, I've lent it to a few people, and it's been very nice to sort of close the loop and get things coming back from this. And the only thing I can say about that whole project is I wish there were more clients like the Walker Art Center back in the 90s. They were wonderful to work with. Next project concerns Yale University. I have a long-standing relationship with Yale. I wasn't educated there. I wasn't educated anywhere, but I've been on the graphic design faculty for something over 30 years. A few years ago, John Gamble, the university printer, asked me to design a typeface for the university in two forms. One sort of ordinary form for printing purposes in the web. It can be used by anyone in the academic community, faculty, staff, students. Anyone can download this typeface. I think Michael has actually used it. Michael, like me, has a strong Yale connection. The prevailing architectural style at Yale is Gothic revival. Is it ever? Gothic. It's amazing how few buildings at Yale have their names on them. God forbid you should need to find a building. You have to ask someone at every street corner. Here is a rare example of a building at Yale which does have its name on it. The only thing is, you can't read it, really. I mean, partly because it's damaged. I mean, it's rather beautiful in a way. It says Sterling Memorial Library. And I had to get some passing student to hold the bushes back so I could photograph this. I mean, it's completely obscure. And here's, in a way, an even worse case. You cannot make words with Gothic capitals. I mean, you cannot. They weren't designed for that. Unlike our Roman capitals, thanks to Mantinea and Felici and all those nice people in the Veneto in the in the 15th century, we have beautiful capitals. But it says graduate in case you happen to be trying to read that. So we came up with some new signs. I didn't design the signs. I just designed the typeface. It's an interesting problem because, normally type designers think of the lowercase. This is a typeface with a lowercase, unlike Mantinia and the Walker face, which were titling faces, has a lowercase. But the lowercase is really subsidiary because whoever designed these signs decided that the main part of them, names of the buildings, would be all in capitals. This is rather unusual for us, but interesting for me. Here's another one, the wonderful Beinecke library. These are the two versions of the typeface I put together. This is the only sort of geeky slide I have to show you. Down below you see the print version, and up above you see what we call street, which is the one for the campus signs. Now, if I removed those two words in red and hadn't explained what these were, and you were a well-schooled typographer, you would look at this slide and you would say, oh yes, the one down at the bottom, that's the one for, composition sizes as a regular normal typeface. The one at the top, the letters are heavier, they're further apart, there's less contrast between thick and thin, the lowercase x height is much bigger. This is obviously a separate version for very small sizes. This is for the footnotes and the 7-point mouse type and so on, very, very good. Well, if you thought that, you would actually be wrong, but you'd be very intelligent because there's a paradoxical similarity between the needs of a typeface at very small sizes and at huge sizes on signs. Reason being, you never see a sign for the first time in front of your nose. You see it at a distance, you see it at an angle. As Ben Terrett said on Wednesday, you drive past it at 70 miles an hour in the dark, in the rain. Good luck reading it. It's a different problem from the one of 7-point mouse type, but they are both inhospitable situations for reading and for legibility and for type. Therefore, they end up, or should end up, by being very similar. So a couple of, dear Yale, having had no signs at all since 1701, they're now all over the campus. You can't get away from this. It's gone viral. You can't avoid this typeface anywhere. Parking signs. This is a sign for the fire department. It's cast in bronze, for God's sake. I was absolutely stunned to see this. The Yale University security, I don't know if you can see it in this slide, but I noticed that the T in the word security is actually falling off. So I said to them, the T in security is insecure, but they thought I was a loony, That's the mascot, the Yale mascot. Well, it is very nice when you see Rolling Stone or you open a nice book and see a typeface of yours in use, or you look at a nice website and it's using Georgia really well and so on. These are, rewarding experiences, I must say. But I think my sort of epiphany where the Yale typeface came when I was walking down the main street in New Haven one day and I saw this. Now, when your typeface is used on the trash bins, I really feel it has arrived, It has sort of been assimilated into the urban culture. It's not, it's on the trash, not in the trash bin. That's not good for morale. I've had that experience as well. But on the trash bin, I was deeply moved when I saw this. It doesn't get any better than this for a type designer, I can tell you. So the last project to talk about is, I don't know if it's true here in South Africa, but in the States, there is quite a conspicuous revival of interest in letterpress printing. I've been to a number of places where they teach it, workshops and so on. Louise mentioned yesterday a number of things that she's had done recently that were letterpress printed. And part of this revival is a wonderful place in Wisconsin called the Hamilton Wood Type Museum. Hamilton used to be the chief manufacturer of wood type in the 19th, early 20th century in the States. Wood type because it was for very large sizes, too big to cast in metal, it would just been too heavy, and so on. So a few years ago, they asked me to design a new wood type. And I jumped at the opportunity because I realized that I'd been bragging. I mean, as sort of Michael said in his introduction, I have kind of designed type for virtually all the ways it's ever been made. You know, metal by hand, metal by machine, photocomposition, digital, desktop, screen, web, whatever. But I'd never done a wood type, so I thought I'd better do it to make an honest man of myself. So I did, and the Hamilton is a really wonderful place. There are these beautiful machines still there. Here is the typeface. They used my digital data, you know, with a computer-controlled router to cut these, and it's only made in one size: 12-line pica, 144.2 inches, 5 centimeters, and it exists in two forms: positive and negative. And when they introduced this typeface, they held a sort of party, a ways-goose over the weekend at the Hamilton. And they set up one Vandercook with the positive version of this typeface, inked it in red. And right next to it was another Vandercook with the negative version of this typeface in black. And we turned the participants at this event loose on these presses with a big stack of paper. And didn't tell them what to do, but they absolutely got the idea behind this and started printing things. I mean, you can obviously just print straightforwardly. This is the red. You see, it's very simple letter form, sort of Latin, triangular serif, sturdy letter form. Here's the reverse plate, printed in reverse form, printed in black. But then the fun starts when you start printing them together. And of course, you can print them in perfect register, as you see in the sort of top of that slide. But look down at the bottom where something started to skid. And then you start to get some quite interesting effects, I think, from deliberately misregistering these two forms of type. So I was just delighted to see them pulling things off the presses that were like this, because this is really, you know, I'm not a printer, but I could imagine that printers would enjoy playing with it. It's a strange thing, come to think of it, how few typefaces in wood or anything else there exist in two forms, in, you know, positive and negative, which are exactly the same, so that you can play these kind of games. Here's one. Yeah, this is well out of register. I think one form is actually upside down, but yeah, I've only included a few of these slides. I've got hundreds of them. And of course, you can use the same plate. I mean, this is the reverse plate, 2 hits out of register. So lots of games you can play with this. And it was, as I say, it was a very nice experience to, first of all, to design a wood type at all, but then to see it used in this very amusing way, just as I hoped it would be. This is the work of a printer, a letterpress printer, who has this font, who's bought this font. Her name is Tracy Hahn, Silver Buckle Press. It's just a very nice thing. And that's perhaps a nice slide, an image for me to end up with. Thank you very much. Thank you for the good vibe. This is a nice thought.